"I can make her walk again," said a mysterious boy, a barefoot orphan with nothing but a stone and a quiet belief. When a millionaire lost all hope after every expert failed to help his paralyzed daughter, the boy appeared. He wasn't a doctor, but the one person who could heal the child. Was he a miracle or a cruel illusion? Find out in today's story, and please let us know where you're listening from. On a cool spring evening in the heart of Freedom Plaza, Philadelphia, the square hummed with life. Street musicians strummed their guitars, children ran between water fountains, and the air was thick with the scent of kettle corn and hot pretzels. Amid this vibrant scene, Richard Blake, a man dressed in an immaculate suit, sat quietly on a weathered bench. His wristwatch sparkled under the fading sun, and his smartphone lay forgotten in his lap. Beside him, in a sleek custom wheelchair, sat his 9-year-old daughter, Sarah Blake. She clutched a worn-out stuffed bunny and stared into space with the haunted eyes of a child who had stopped dreaming. Since the car accident that left her paralyzed, Richard had spared no expense. World-renowned doctors, futuristic therapies, overseas clinics. But all had told him the same thing: she would never walk again. Richard looked at his daughter, a lump forming in his throat. "Time to go, kiddo," he murmured. Then came a voice, "Sir, I can make your daughter walk again." Richard turned, startled, to find a barefoot boy, no older than 8, standing before them. Dirt clung to his torn clothes and his feet were caked in dust, yet his eyes held a quiet conviction beyond his years. The boy's name was Micah Jameson, though he didn't offer it right away. He didn't beg. He didn't offer to sell anything. He just stood there, unwavering. Richard's first instinct was to wave him off. "Do you know how many professionals have told me that's impossible, and you, a kid off the street, think you know more than them?" "I don't need credentials," Micah replied. "I just need your permission." Sarah, eyes wide with curiosity and something else Richard hadn't seen in ages, pure, unfiltered hope, tugged gently at her father's sleeve. "Dad, can we try, please?" Her voice trembled with excitement, not fear, and her grip on his sleeve tightened like she was clinging to possibility itself. Richard froze, startled not by the question, but by the look in her eyes. He looked back at the boy, standing tall despite the dirt and threadbare clothes. Micah didn't flinch. He didn't speak again. He just waited. Richard's instinct screamed at him to say no, to protect Sarah from more heartbreak, to keep her away from illusions. He sighed heavily, his voice thick with hesitation but edged in surrender. 1 hour. That's all you get. 1 hour to try. Under the shade of a jacaranda tree in a quieter corner of the plaza, Micah set to work. He arranged twigs and pebbles in deliberate circles, spread a frayed cloth on the ground, and handed Sarah a small, smooth black stone. "What is this?" Richard asked, watching with narrowed eyes. "It's a reminder," Micah said. "She needs to remember walking, not with her legs yet, but in her mind." Micah knelt before Sarah. "Close your eyes. Feel the wind in your hair. Feel the grass beneath your feet. Imagine running." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes, gathering so quickly they clung to her lashes like tiny crystals. "I feel something," she said slowly, her voice shaky, almost afraid to believe it. Her fingers clenched the smooth stone tighter. "I think I felt my legs. Just a little, like a ripple under the surface." She opened her eyes, staring down at her legs with newfound focus, as though trying to will the sensation to return. Her whole body was still, but her spirit surged. Richard's breath caught in his throat as he took an unconscious step forward, heart hammering against his ribs. He wanted to speak, to question, to rationalize, but the words wouldn't come. In that moment, there was only Sarah's voice, filled with wonder, and the possibility of a miracle beginning to unfold. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. Something about the boy nagged at him. Before dawn, he called in favors, requesting a background check on the mysterious child. What he discovered stopped him cold. Micah Jameson, real name Micah Arrieta, had been the lone survivor of a car crash 3 years earlier. The drunk driver, an employee of Blake Logistics. The settlement, silenced with money. Richard had buried the story to protect his company, to safeguard the empire he had built with calculated decisions and flawless public relations. No one had asked about survivors. No one had mentioned a child. The child had lived. And he had come back, not for revenge, but for something else entirely. Following a lead, Richard ventured into Kensington, to a shack with a sign that read, Dr. Harold Amos, free rehab. No promises, only gratitude. Dr. Amos, a thin, limping man with silver hair and sharp eyes, greeted him without surprise. "You're Richard Blake." Micah said you'd come? The retired doctor confirmed Micah's story. Paralyzed, abandoned, healed through unconventional therapy and a will of iron. That boy healed himself, Amos said, handing Richard a tattered notebook. I just showed him how to believe again. Back at the mansion, Richard invited Micah to stay. The housekeeper, Janet Cooper, bristled. He's not trained. He's not safe. But Sarah smiled like the sun when Micah arrived. Richard didn't care what anyone said. He stays. A room in the greenhouse was converted into a therapy space. With homemade braces, ropes, and weighted cloth balls, Micah and Sarah began anew. They played. They failed. They tried again. Every small movement became a celebration. Then, one rainy morning, Sarah couldn't move. Sharp pain struck her back. Micah rushed to her side, but Janet called Dr. Crane, who declared, "This ends now." Richard was torn. His daughter was hurting, clearly in physical distress. But there was something in her he hadn't seen in years, a flicker of fight, of life. She wasn't hopeless anymore. Sarah, choking back sobs, clutched his arm and begged, "Don't send him away." Her voice cracked, but her spirit didn't. "Please, Dad, he's helping me. I know he is." Richard stared down at her, heart pounding, a war of logic and emotion raging inside him. He looked at Micah. The boy stood silent, head slightly bowed, waiting without argument. Finally, Richard made a decision. His voice was low but firm. 2 more weeks. Show me progress, or it ends. Micah nodded once, solemn and grateful. Sarah exhaled in relief, gripping the black stone in her palm as though it had just become her anchor in a storm. Dr. Crane and Micah, natural opposites, formed a truce. Together, they blended traditional exercises with Micah's belief-based visualizations. Sarah struggled, but refused to give up. Every session pushed her to her limits, both physically and emotionally. But she pressed forward, driven by Micah's quiet encouragement and her own burning desire to reclaim a part of herself. There was something inside her now, something Micah had awakened, that refused to let her surrender. And even when her body faltered, her spirit surged onward, determined to meet the challenge head on. Then it happened. One afternoon, with Richard and the entire household watching, Sarah stood, on her own, for 3 full seconds. Richard dropped to his knees, weeping. Dr. Crane said nothing, only removed his glasses in disbelief. That night, dinner was different. For the first time, Richard invited every servant, every staff member to his table. My daughter walked today. And not because of doctors, because of a boy who believed. Later, in his room, Micah found a legal envelope resting on the edge of his bed, its seal unbroken, and his name written in careful script across the front. Inside were adoption papers, real, official documents bearing Richard Blake's signature and the state seal. It didn't feel real. His eyes scanned the pages again and again as if trying to convince himself they weren't a dream. He looked up just as Richard entered the room, his expression soft but serious. "You brought my daughter back to life," Richard said, his voice tight with emotion. "You gave her something no one else could, hope, joy, and strength. You reminded me what it means to fight for someone you love. Now let me give you something in return, a home, a family, a place where you'll never have to survive alone again." Micah accepted, with tears in his eyes. Sarah rushed to him and hugged him tightly, her arms wrapping around him not as someone grateful for a helper, but as someone welcoming family. It was the kind of embrace that didn't ask questions, didn't need permission. It simply said, "You belong here." Richard stood by the door, watching them with a fullness in his chest he hadn't felt since the day Sarah was born. For the first time, Richard felt like he had more than wealth. He had purpose, real, profound, and irreversible purpose. And Micah? He hadn't come to destroy Richard. He had come to save a part of himself. Because sometimes the miracle isn't walking again. It's believing you were never broken to begin with. What would you do if the person who saved your child was the one your past nearly destroyed? Do you think Richard told Micah about the past? Was it right of him to adopt the child? Please share your honest opinions in the comments down below, and thank you for listening to Storyline Narratives.